Hi everyone, welcome back or welcome to my channel. My name's Lizzie and today I'm making a video about The True Cost. So The True Cost is a documentary. In the UK it's currently available on Netflix and it's all about the problems associated with fast fashion. Now you might think, hang on a minute, you sew, you make your own clothes, surely the problems with fast fashion don't apply to you? But kind of what this documentary really taught me was that it really does. It applies to us in the sewing community as well, because the problems caused by fast fashion are not just to do with the actual construction and making of the garments and the sewing. The problems also stem from the cotton production and the dyeing process, like cotton obviously to make the fabrics and then the dyeing of the fabrics. And we buy fabrics, we consume fabrics, we obviously we put the blood, sweat and tears into actually making the garment, but we consume fabrics. And I watched this documentary and then I watched it again a few weeks later because I just couldn't get it out of my head and I wanted to watch it again, and I took notes, I wanted to really kind of capture some of the kind of ideas that were spoken about, and it really moved me and it really spoke to me. So I want to make this video to kind of summarise the key headline points and facts and figures that were spoken about in this documentary, the things that really struck a chord with me and stood out to me. And then after I've done that, I want to kind of pose a few questions, like put a few questions out there, as in the questions that this documentary has kind of caused me to ask or to want to ask. And then finally at the end I want to just summarise a few action points that I think us in the sewing community could do, action points that we could take in order to do our little tiny part to help this and to try and break away from the problems of fast fashion. So without further ado, let me get started with just kind of summarising some of the key ideas and points that were spoken about in this documentary. Oh, and just before I get into it, just so you're aware, this documentary is a few years old now. I think it's about 5 years old, and some of the big headline figures they used, I think, are based on America, but to be honest, I've largely decided to kind of read it as those figures probably being applicable to the Western world in general, but just so you're aware, I think they're US-based figures. And this first one is, so in the 1960s, the USA made 95% of its own clothes in the USA. Now it's only 3%, because as I think we all know, now most of our garments are all made abroad as opposed to in our local industries. The documentary then went to talk about Dhaka, the 2013 factory collapse in Bangladesh. Now I'm sure lots of you remember this from the news, and there are many other, unfortunately, there are many other disasters that have happened within the fashion industry, but one of them is Dhaka in 2013, where a factory collapsed. Even though workers had pointed out these huge cracks to the factory owners and said it's not safe, they were forced to continue working. The factory collapsed and over 900 people died, and that just goes to show partly the awful conditions that garment workers have to work in, and they're literally putting their lives at risk by going to work. But also it's the pressures of producing cheap garments can mean that things like health and safety are sacrificed because there's just so much pressure to keep costs down so that we can have cheap clothing. Another story that just broke my heart was that a garment worker also from Dhaka formed a union with some of the other garment workers, wrote a list of demands, very basic kind of fair pay, health and safety type demands, gave that list to the factory owners, and all of these women, they were largely women, were taken into a room and beaten up, like severely beaten up. I'm not even going to comment on that because it's just, it speaks for itself, it's just awful. Another fact is that 1 in 6 people in the world, 1 in 6 people today in the world work in the fashion industry. And that's just mind-blowing. It's the most labour-intensive industry in the world. I just thought that was really interesting. The documentary then moved on to talk about cotton, which I think is so relevant to us sewists because we consume fabrics, lots of them are made of cotton. So it spoke about the cotton farmers, and a lot of cotton is produced in India. and it spoke about the problem with the monopoly over seeds. So the cotton farmers have basically no choice over where they buy their seeds from, and they're under so much pressure to produce more cotton and kind of sell it for lower prices that they get kind of talked into buying these genetically modified seeds, which are obviously more expensive, but don't worry, they're going to produce you the most fabulous crop. They're very expensive, these GM seeds. They often have to take out debt to be able to buy these seeds as an investment, but then the seeds don't perform and the farmers are, you know, left with debt and a poor crop. But then, don't worry, they can buy pesticides and chemicals to spray on the GM seed crops so that they will perform much better next time. The chemicals from the pesticides get into the local water streams and people get cancer. But don't worry, there are, there are cancer drugs to fix that. And don't get me wrong, I know I'm barely scratching the surface, and I do not for a moment profess to be any kind of expert in this. This is just me regurgitating things to you from this documentary. But who owns the seeds, the GM seeds? Who owns the pesticides? Who owns the cancer drugs? It's pharmaceutical companies. And it's lose, lose, lose for the Indian cotton farmers, and it's a win-win-win for the big Western pharmaceutical companies. It just broke my heart hearing that, because it's just, these farmers are kind of trapped, and they really are. And they spoke about Punjab, which is an area in India, and it's the largest user of pesticides in India, this area. So much so that 70 to 80 children in every village are born with mental or physical disabilities, or both, due to the pesticides that are filtering into the water systems, into the food supply, the water supply. The pregnant women are obviously ingesting these chemicals through the food and water that they're consuming, and their babies are being born with these awful, terrible physical and mental disabilities. It's just awful. And another sadly devastating fact is that one Indian farmer commits suicide every 30 minutes. It's the largest rate of suicide in history, and I think, again, I don't profess to have proper knowledge on kind of suicide rates and mental illness and things, but I just think that's got to speak for the fact that these farmers are under so much pressure that, I mean, it's leading to things like that. So, on to slightly less emotionally draining fact is that we purchase 400% more garments than we did 2 decades ago. 400% more. And the documentary explained it, or described it, as an unprecedented increase in consumption. It's just, that seems to be the crux of this problem. It's that we're just consuming so much. It's consumerism. That seems to be the main problem here. It's what's driving this demand for the low prices. Really interesting, I did not know this, but only about 10% of the clothes that are given to charity shops, or given to charity, get sold in local charity shops. Only 10%, that blows my mind, because I always feel so good about myself when I have a big old wardrobe clear out and I take a big bin bag of clothes to the local charity shop, feeling really good about myself because I'm doing this, good thing. But actually only 10% of it gets sold in the charity shops. The rest gets sent abroad to places like Haiti. And they told us, the documentary explains, that Haiti used to have a thriving local garment industry where local people would, you'd learn to sew, and then that would be your skill and your trade that would ensure you've got employment for your whole life and that you can provide for your family, because this skill is going to guarantee that you can get work. Not anymore. Haiti receives so many donations from charities in terms of clothes that the local garment industry is completely ruined and there are no jobs anymore. So, and they receive way more donations than they need. Literally these huge stacks of, like, big bales of clothing, like, stacked up. I mean, how sad is that? the West, we're trying to help, but actually in the process of trying to help, we're destroying local industries and removing people's ability to earn a living from their trade. It's really sad. And the last thing I want to tell you about is Kanpur, which is another area in India along the river Ganges, and it's an area where a lot of dyeing of fabrics happens. 50 million litres of toxic waste is produced every day, and it ends up in the river Ganges. And again, these chemicals that are ending up in the local water systems are causing huge problems with jaundice, cancer, terrible rashes, and people's skin being bleached. I mean, isn't that just dreadful? So yeah, I'm not going to even try and sort of conclude those facts I've just thrown at you, because as I've said, I'm not an expert in this at all. I just really wanted to relay some of these facts to you, because my awareness of this stuff has been increased just a little bit by watching this documentary, and I thought it might be helpful for you guys to have your awareness increased a little bit too. I definitely want to keep learning, and if any of you have more sources about this stuff, let me know. But this all has raised questions for me, many unanswered questions, the main ones being, where does our fabric come from? Like, we don't, you know, when we're buying fabric, the information is not available to us as to where was this fabric produced, are the workers treated fairly, where did the cotton come from, you know, are there pesticides and chemicals involved, what's the life like of the local people? You know, we don't as consumers, we don't have that. Like, I want to know, where does my fabric come from? So if any of you know of any sources where I can educate myself more on this topic, please let me know, because I'd really, really like to keep learning about this. The second question it raised for me is, do we have a choice? Because there was one person they interviewed in the documentary, I think it might have been Stella McCartney, who basically said, yes, fast fashion is awful, you mustn't buy into it. But I don't think as consumers in the UK we have a choice but to buy into it. The only way you can know that you're buying something that is not, you know, okay, what I was gonna say, and in my own thought process I've realised that that's not even true, but if I had enough money to buy all my clothes from Burberry and they all had the little label in them, made in England, then maybe I could be confident that these garments were made in England as opposed to in factories abroad where there are awful living conditions, etc. But actually, even then, even if it was made in England, that doesn't tell me where the cotton came from, it doesn't tell me about the dyeing process, etc. So I just feel completely trapped, because I feel like no matter where I buy my fabric, no matter which high street shops I choose to buy clothes from, because although I make my own clothes, I do still buy some clothes too. I've got no desire to learn to make jeans just yet, so I'm just going to continue buying my jeans from the high street shops. But I mean, I think everyone assumes that Primark is bad and Primark is involved with all these issues. But I'm really pretty confident that it's all shops, whether it's Primark or French Connection, like, a price point aside, like, as consumers, we don't know. We have no power to make informed decisions about where we purchase our clothes from or where we purchase our fabrics from, because the information about where it comes from and the ethical standards, etc., it's just not available. Like, what can we do? I literally ask myself, like, you know, do I have a choice but to buy into this fast fashion stuff? So then I started to think about a few action points, a few things that us as kind of the sewing community, a few things that we can do to try and minimise our impact on the whole fast fashion thing. So first things first is quite an obvious one, but let's, you know, if any of you are kind of hearing me here and are on the wavelength of wanting to try and kind of improve this in your own little tiny way, let's do slow fashion. Let's try and prioritise quality over quantity in the fabrics we buy and the garments that we make. Let's try and slow down a bit. I know we're making our clothes, which is obviously better than buying them in terms of the impact on the rest of the world, but, you know, buying 10 new items a month is kind of similar to making 10 new items a month. It's still like a high turnover of things in our wardrobes, and we've got the power to make our own clothes, and it takes so much time and love and energy. Let's try and really treasure the things we make, and let's try and make fewer really beautiful things that we're going to really treasure. I think that's something we could all try and do. The next action point I'd like to suggest is to get involved with or support Fashion Revolution Week. So Fashion Revolution is a campaign against fast fashion and for slow fashion, and Fashion Revolution Week is coming up. I'll put all their details, their website and their Instagram in the description box below so that you can read all about what they're doing and see how you'd like to get involved. But Fashion Revolution Week is the 23rd to the 29th of April, and one of their big sort of campaign things they do is hashtag who made my clothes, and obviously this applies more to people who buy clothes than make clothes, but they're encouraging consumers to ask clothing brands and clothing shops who made my clothes, like to try and increase this awareness and like trying to spread some information. Thirdly, we can ask questions. We can ask questions of our fabric shops. Now, don't get me wrong, because oh yeah, I wanted to mention this. This whole kind of topic of sustainability within sort of fashion and sewing was spoken about recently on the Love to Sew podcast. I'll put a link to it down below. Do go and listen because it was a really good episode. And they spoke about the fact that when you go to a fabric shop and you ask them, where did my fabric come from, they're not going to have the information 9 times out of 10 or 99 times out of 100. And if a fabric shop owner says to their supplier, where do these fabrics come from, again, the supplier most likely is not going to have that information to be able to pass on to them. So there's basically just this huge issue with information and visibility. So if we start asking questions of our fabric shops, where do these fabrics come from, we really want to know more information, then maybe it'll encourage them to ask more questions of their suppliers, etc, etc. If we all start asking and demanding this information, maybe slowly we might start to get some of it, who knows. Lastly, I thought we could turn this slightly depressing topic, I don't mean for this to be like a depressing heavy video about scary, sad facts, but we can maybe make this a little bit fun and start up an Instagram tag. So I thought that what we could do is all post a photo, or it could be like 4 photos in a grid or whatever you want, about garments that we've made that we either love wearing really regularly or that we want to wear more regularly, like pledging to wear more regularly, and we could use the hashtag sewists wear it again. My thinking behind this is that I think a big part of the fast fashion movement is that women in particular, I think, are under a huge amount of pressure to have new outfits, different outfits all the time, particularly when it comes to things like special occasions. And actually, as I've said, we put so much love and energy into making our clothes that we should be really proud to wear them again and again and again. One of the items I want to post is my tropical green jumpsuit, Vogue V905 jumpsuit that I made recently. I wore it to a wedding in California in March, and I've got another wedding to go to in September, and I'm gonna wear it again. I'm not gonna make a brand new dress just because there's another wedding, because I already have this beautiful jumpsuit that I'm so proud of, and we should all be really proud to wear things again. Let's try and break away from this idea of needing a new outfit for every special occasion or whatever. Let's treasure the things that we've made, the things that we really love, and let's pledge, let's tell each other, yeah, I'm proud to wear this again and again because I love it. So what I'd like to suggest is that you post a picture of whatever your inspiration is, your garment that you love to wear again or want to keep wearing, want to wear more, and use the hashtag sewists wear it again, and tag people. You don't have to tag people, but I'd love if you wanted to tag a few of your sewing friends just to kind of share this message around the community. Let's be proud to not always need a brand new outfit. Let's be proud to wear the things we've made again and again. So thank you ever so much for watching. Thank you if you've made it to the end of this quite heavy video. As I've said, I'm definitely not well informed enough to properly tackle this subject, but I hope this has been an interesting little snapshot for you, and I hope you go and watch the True Cost documentary. I hope you go and listen to the Love to Sew podcast about sustainability in fashion and in sewing. And yeah, I really hope you'll join in with Sewists Wear It Again. Thanks again for watching. Give it a thumbs up if you liked it, subscribe to see more of my videos, and I'll see you next time. Bye!